What's up, everybody? This is Zachary Kruger, host of Roster Locked, and this is, in fact, Roster Locked, a best ball show hosted over on RotoViz YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber yet to the RotoViz YouTube channel, be sure to go over there and subscribe. Tonight, I am blessed to be joined by a very special guest, none other than Mr. Hayden Winks of Underdog Fantasy. He is a co-host of the Underdog Fantasy podcast and also a regular contributor to the Underblog over on UnderdogFantasy.com. There's a link in the YouTube bio to check that out. He's been doing a lot of great work over there. We're going to get into a puppy tournament here in a little bit, but first, Hayden, thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure having a chance to speak with you and talk a little bit of best ball shop and fire off a draft, which I know you don't do much of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks for having me. I can't do any of the drafts myself, so I spend like 40, 60 hours a week going through the data, doing all these rankings, but I can't actually play as an employee. So it's always nice for me to come on these shows. It feels like I have like a little bit of say whatever I'm doing instead of just like blindly touting. But it's nice to actually walk through a full draft.
Yeah, and we have your rankings uploaded here, so we're ready to go. I went ahead and found the uploaded rankings for those. We'll draft right off your rankings and everything. And to help scratch the itch during the season, I'll even be sure to update you on this team just so you can kind of see how it's going and follow along with us. But before we get into the show, I try to always touch on some people's work, my guest work, whoever's on. And you wrote a really awesome piece over at the Underblog the other day, titled When to Draft Running Backs on Underdog Fantasy. And you kind of just did a deep dive on last year's Best Ball Mania 1 tournament, looking at different teams and how they performed as far as win rate and stuff like that goes, and how their builds look, not just in terms of overall running back construction, 5 running back or 6 running back, but also where teams had selected a certain number of running backs as the rounds approached. You may do a better way of explaining that than I just did. So I'm going to let you talk on it in just a moment here. But it was a really awesome article that I thought that maybe anyone who hasn't gotten a chance to read it yet should take a look at. It has an awesome graph that I also wanted to show people. I'll start up here. I can just scroll down. You let me know when to stop, or we can just go right to the graph. But tell us a little bit about this article, and what we're looking at here. So it was a really awesome piece.
Thanks for that. So the biggest things with the best ball stuff is it's such a new game. There's not that much data, especially for half PPR data, because Underdog is a half PPR site, and a lot of the best ball sites are full PPR. So if you're trying to apply some of the findings that we're finding from a full PPR site onto half PPR, we're already kind of working against ourselves here. And then Best Ball Mania 1 and Best Ball Mania 2 this year, it's a different game structure where you're not trying to come first out of 12. You're trying to come in first out of 50,000, first out of 150,000. And by doing that, you have to get week by week by week in the playoff structure. So you're kind of going for different builds here. So what I tried to do in this graph right here is to just find when players were drafting each running back by what part of the draft. Because I think right now we're talking about roster construction. It's always through the lens of what your team looks like when the draft is over. So on Underdog, that's round 18. How many running backs have you drafted? 4, 5, or 6? How many wide receivers? 8, 9, 10, 11. But we all know if you've drafted 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds, you shouldn't be drafting a team with 6 running backs. So what this chart is kind of showing is how many points on average a team was scoring based on how many running backs their team was drafting at each individual round. So I think eventually from 2-3 years from now, I think that all of the roster construction is going to be built through the lens at each part of the draft, not just when the draft is over. And I think that this was one of the first pieces that's going to eventually get there, because I think eventually in round 8, we'll know if you've drafted 5 wide receivers, when should you draft your 6? Is it this round? Is it 2 rounds from now? I think eventually that's where the best ball analysis is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a trailblazing piece, if you would, in terms of just kind of the way you decide to tackle this and approach it. I've never seen anything like it. I think the closest thing I would say that I've seen to it would be a little bit of the roster construction explorers that RotoViz offers, where you can kind of look into the different historical drafts over on FFPC and My Fantasy League, where you can kind of say, okay, I took wide receiver 4 in round 5, and then you can adjust win rates based off of that. But the way that this graph kind of lays everything out, it kind of prevents you from having to do all of the searching as a reader of a user of maybe a tool like the roster construction explorer RotoViz. Instead, you have a graph where you literally outlined everything, which really makes it kind of easy to digest and lays everything right out there for you. So So yeah, it's a really, really awesome article. Was there any particular takeaways that you took from this in finding the research that you did see?
So first of all, the RotoViz tool is awesome. I use it all the time. Same with the Game Splits tool. I'm in that all the time. So shout out to you guys. Secondly, just talking, I think the difference between full PPR and half PPR, especially when the ADPs have moved around, is I think that you can do 0 RB on half PPR. You can also go robust RB, and you can do hyper fragile. I do something called bimodal RB where you draft 2 and then you don't draft 2 until way later. I think all of them are completely viable on Underdog, just the way that the structure is set up. And I think that the skill in this is to be able to use each strategy, but to be able to actually perfect it and actually know the rules and the concepts of why you would use each type of strategy. So I think after looking at this, the range, like a three RB team in the first couple rounds did just as well as a 0 RB team did. It's just how are you using that like kind of concepts for the rest of your draft. So basically that was a long explanation to say, know all the strategies, use all the strategies. It really kind of depends on how the draft boards fall into you the first couple rounds.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is that if you execute any strategy properly, it could work. Is that what I'm supposed to understand?
Yes.
That's awesome. I think that any haters of a particular strategy, maybe take note on that. It is possible. You don't necessarily have to be married to one particular strategy here to be able to make it work. And then obviously it also comes down to like health and injury and stuff like that. I thought one interesting little note on your article here, which kind of stood out to me, was just really literally in the first part about round 1, teams that drafted running back in round 1 averaged 7.89 more fantasy points than teams that didn't draft a running back in round 1. I thought that was interesting just when you factor in the fact that all of those round 1 teams would have had Christian McCaffrey and they still even perform well. So that was even kind of an interesting little takeaway I thought about there, just kind of showing how some of those elite running backs in the first round can really boost up your team. And then you talked about going bimodal. If you go running back out the gate, I'm sure that those get even more boosted throughout the course of the season if both of those running backs stay healthy. But real quick, I'm going to get us into a draft, and then I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you know it by heart, you know it by heart. If you don't, you're welcome to pull it up. But I think you are allowed to draft in the Scott Fish Bowl this year. Is that correct? How's that team shaping up for you? I am currently in, I think, the 14th round, so I'm not quite out of it yet.
Yeah, I'm like round 16 or so. I think I had the 6th overall pick. I went Travis Kelce, and in my league, everybody was drafting quarterbacks, and I instead went with Zeke and Tyreek Hill and Calvin Ridley and Michael Thomas to start, and I punted quarterbacks, and luckily it was just me trying to bet against, I was hoping all of my league mates weren't going to draft a third quarterback, because if they all drafted a third quarterback, I would have been so screwed. But they all stayed with 2 quarterbacks early, so I was able to scoop up a couple guys later on. So my strategy paid off, but there was a couple rounds where I was sweating that people weren't going to actually dip into like the Jameis Winston tier, because I would have been totally screwed.
Yeah, that's actually a gamble I played as well. Who were your top 2 quarterbacks? Do you remember who you drafted?
I have Trey Lance, Big Ben, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Mac Jones. So I ended up going with 4. Just they all kind of fell, and I knew that it was like 2 veterans that could get benched or be terrible with 2 rookies that we'll see, and I kind of just went with that.
That's right. Oh wow, we have the 101 actually. This is going to be perfect
Nice.
too. I had the 101 the other night with Marcus Mosier, and that makes conversations here really easy because we can just flip things around really quickly. Are we going to go Christian McCaffrey 101? Is that
I've toyed with Dalvin Cook, and like the only thing you can say about Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey is literally last year, if you drafted Dalvin Cook in Best Ball Mania 1, your team advanced to the playoffs 52% of the time. That was the highest out of any player in all the player, but even like Justin Jefferson teams, they didn't make to the playoffs as much as the Dalvin Cook teams did.
Oh wow.
And we've seen nothing's changed for Dalvin Cook. Like the exact same offense is there. So that's like the only explanation that I can have for Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey. But even with that, I think that you can project Christian McCaffrey for more usage. And I think that Dalvin Cook's like his shoulder, torn ACL, I think that his injury history is a little more significant than Christian McCaffrey, even though McCaffrey missed most of last year.
Yeah, McCaffrey, if I remember correctly, was just a high ankle sprain, correct? So it wasn't anything super serious in the grand scheme of like, I don't think it required surgery or anything like that. But I mean, that's an interesting point that you made on Dalvin Cook. It would be curious to see if the same would have been the case for CMC teams last season as well, if he would have been healthy. But We'll go CMC if you're good with that, and
Yep.
we'll get this first pick underway. So, real quick before we get completely off the Scott Fishbowl conversation, you mentioned having Trey Lance and Ben Roethlisberger, which I have both of those guys as well. I also kind of tackled it in a little bit similar fashion to what you did. I faded quarterback a little bit more by actually starting Trey Lance and Justin Fields and trying to bet on these two rookie quarterbacks who we don't know if they're going to start or not, hoping that fading them and kind of building up the rest of my player pool in the meantime would get me some high upside quarterbacks that they end up starting most of the season. And then I was fortunate to run it back with Ben Roethlisberger later. And then I kind of hedged my Trey Lance pick by going Jimmy Garoppolo in I think the 14th round, just so I know I'm going to have hopefully two starters regardless of whether or not Lance and Fields start. But that's kind of the way I tackled it too. So you and I are both on board with the Lance and Roethlisberger picks to kind of help carry this roster a little bit of the way.
But we gotta go. Big Ben's ready to go. But if you look at last year's scoring, Big Ben was a top 20 overall player in this format, just the way that the scoring has worked out. I'm anticipating the Steelers' offense to completely change and Big Ben to not be as productive as he was last year for this format. But Trey Lance has like that massive ceiling, and I was thinking about going Jimmy G as well. He was on my queue list, but then somebody took him, and then I pivoted to Mac Jones. But I think those guys, I think it was the right move. If you didn't get the elite guys, I think everybody was kind of force feeding like the QB 18 range. And I just wanted to like sit it out. Like it was like Calvin Ridley or Baker Mayfield. I was like, Calvin Ridley's going to ball out. Let me just take him.
It does reach a point in those drafts, and that's the one thing that I think is so interesting with the Scott Fishbowl too, is just everyone is literally drafting so differently. Like I had looked at Jimmy Garoppolo's ADP when I was trying to pick him, and I think it was like 160-ish, but like he had gone as early as like 89th overall and as late as like 230th. So it gets really bizarre in the Scott Fishbowl streets trying to navigate what the crowd is doing, and then also analyzing what your league is doing as they're approaching the draft as well, and trying to figure out how they're valuing different players in different positions. So that's definitely kind of a fun way to do this. But we are officially underway here in the puppy draft of Underdog Fantasy. It's the newest tournament format introduced by Underdog Fantasy. You guys can jump in if you want to. They're $5 a piece. It's filling quickly. I think it's over 50% filled or nearing that right now. So it's been very popular. Definitely get in while you can. Hayden and I went ahead and took Christian McCaffrey, number 1 overall. It's a pretty slam dunk pick. He did make an interesting case for Dalvin Cook and the success rate that teams who had him on the roster last season had. They made the playoffs, I believe he said, just over 50% of the time. So Dalvin Cook, definitely a solid pick in this format if he's healthy, but Christian McCaffrey should be just as solid. We're kind of expecting him to be what we hoped he would be last year. He was the 101 overall. Are you looking to do anything in particular as we approach the end of round 2? We're drafting off of Hayden's ranks, by the way, so everything that he sees here should look pretty familiar. He probably has this idea pretty mentally mapped out in his head already, if I had to guess.
So if I can get one of the top 15 running backs here, I like doing that. This is also the range where if like a Calvin Ridley falls, you're super stoked for that. And then if those options aren't there, that's when you get into your Darren Wallers, your Justin Jeffersons, and those types. But like if I can get a Joe Mixon or a Clyde Edwards-Helaire to fall, this is like the dream start. And I think that there's a huge advantage picking the 101 and the 102 just because you can sometimes get one of these elite running backs to fall. And the worst case scenario is you end up with like Darren Waller.
Yeah. Darren Waller is a fine consolation prize in this. I've been taking a lot of Darren Waller. I just think that his target share this season is going to be absolutely absurd. We really don't know what to expect out of Henry Ruggs in year 2. John Brown, he has a little bit of a significant injury history, and on top of that, it's his first year at the offense. Darren Waller could just be force-fed tons of targets. We keep on thinking we've seen the best of Darren Waller, and then last season he does even better than he did in 2019. I think we're kind of expecting that may be the case again in 2021. I went ahead and queued up Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We just lost him. So did you want to follow the rankings and go Justin Jefferson, Darren Waller, if those are our 2 picks? How close do you want to stick with what we're looking at here?
That's the 2 I would go with. I think that Justin Jefferson's an absolute baller. And what's so good about his situation is if something happened to Adam Thielen, like there isn't a number 3 receiver, his target share and stuff would be so absurd. And I thought like he was already last year, just watching him and then some of the like yards per route run data against man coverage. It is absolutely absurd what he was able to accomplish. So in this situation, I would go Jefferson and AJ Brown But the conversation when you get into Keenan Allen and Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, all those guys have worthwhile cases. I'm just higher on these two youngsters.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are guys who I'm absolutely fine with taking here. I think I'd be doing the exact same as you as well. A.J. Brown, his ADP has dipped a little bit with the Julio Jones trade since that took place at the beginning of July, but it hasn't dropped significantly. He's still going in the second round. He's a solid pick here. And then on top of that, I still think that he's going to be the alpha in this offense by a pretty decent margin. I don't think that Julio Jones is going to come in there and command the wide receiver one target share. Do you have any particular stance on that? Obviously, you have A.J. Brown ranked higher than Julio Jones here, but how do you see their target share shaping up during the season?
I think Julio Jones could still play. I think even on tape last year when he was in those healthy games, he still looked like a total baller. But A.J. Brown is like an absolute certified baller, and I think that there's room for both players to have a big score. And if something ever happened to Derrick Henry, all of a sudden this balanced offense would not be so balanced, and all of a sudden now you have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones with even higher targets per game. So there's a lot of ways that this A.J. Brown pick could go really, really well. And it doesn't hurt that some people were drafting A.J. Brown 5 spots earlier a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was definitely one of those guys who was like taking A.J. Brown occasionally at like the turn if I was picking at the back end of the first round, just to be a little early on him. On the off chance that maybe Julio Jones doesn't land in Tennessee, then that pick probably holds up and is a pretty decent pick at that ADP. I realize that may have been the case, but I think sometimes in these things you got to just kind of take the gamble and understand that the upside that you're picking at that spot, if the trade doesn't happen, makes it pay off, and not, you can't be afraid of everybody. Of course, I've been confident in other picks. Earlier this year, I was drafting a lot of A.J. Dillon because I knew Aaron Jones was about to leave town, and that didn't quite happen at the ADP value that I hoped it would be. I don't think those teams are going to be doing quite as well as I wanted them to, but we'll see what happens. But no, I'm with you. I think that Julio Jones still has plenty left in the tank, but I think this team is A.J. Brown's team as far as target share goes. He was so good last season on, what was an injured leg, I think, for most of the year. So if he's back healthy this year, I think he'll be good to go. While we're on the topic of Titans, one Titan who has risen at a ridiculous pace over the last couple of weeks is Darlington Evans. I'm not quite sure if his ADP right now, I'll pull it up real quick, but I know Eric Beinfort has been really pumping up the Darlington Evans talk. I was as well a few weeks ago. I've been pretty high on Darlington Evans. I think in one of my recent articles over at RotoViz, I had called him like the prototypical league winner in terms of the offense that he plays on, and then what I think he can bring to the table in terms of being in the running and the passing game. Where are you at on a guy like Darlington Evans late in drafts right now?
So coming out of school, I thought he was a terrific prospect. Not a terrific prospect, but he was a serviceable prospect. Had the production, early declare. I thought his tape was good. He had the measurables that you're looking for, basically everything that you were looking for. Obviously, the landing spot wasn't that great, but when Darlington Evans was healthy last year, and it wasn't too many games, he was the clear-cut number 2 back, and they were like healthy scratching the other guys. So I don't think that there's any reason to like be concerned over his rookie season. Like he just got hurt, and that's just the way she goes. And there's a chance that he plays some third downs, and maybe you get a 1 or 2 weeks out of him where he catches 4 or 5 passes in a weird game environment. But obviously the big thing is if Derrick Henry gets hurt, Darlington Evans wouldn't have the Derrick Henry role because they're not built like at all. But if he can get 15 carries plus the third down work, all of a sudden we're talking about him as an RB2. So I think that he's one of these guys with the ceiling. And speaking of Eric Beinfort, he made a great point about how Evans is correlated with the A.J. Brown and Julio Jones in particular, because if Derrick Henry misses time, A.J. Brown's looking better and Darlington Evans is looking better. So I think that was a really good point about knowing the ceiling outcomes are often correlated with the backup running backs. I think the same thing you can say about Alexander Mattison, where the Vikings probably aren't going to run the ball as often if Dalvin Cook missed time. So if you can pair Justin Jefferson with Alexander Mattison and that build, if Dalvin Cook misses time, all of a sudden your team's looking really sweet.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting way to think about it. I don't think I've quite thought about those closely correlated players in that way. So that's a really, really good point. I think the thing that I find most interesting with Darlington Evans is just how drafters are viewing him this year compared to last year. I know when I was looking at FFPC ADP in particular, just because that's what we have over on RotoViz. I think his spots right now this year compared to last year, it's like an ADP, a difference of like 30 or 40 picks. It's rather significant for a player who, yeah, it sucks he was injured last season. We didn't get, quite what we hoped from him. But in terms of the situation, nothing has really changed there. Derrick Henry still isn't going to catch passes. I don't think Brian Hill is a threat to really, command any kind of significant workload. I think Darlington Evans is pretty squarely the running back too that he was last season on Tennessee. And now we're getting him at even more of a discounted price. So if you're one of those guys who liked him last year, now you can benefit from the hopes that he's going to be healthy this year and people doubting him because of what we saw last season.
Yep.
We're about to be on the clock here. We are sitting with Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown already rostered here. Looking at your rankings, you have Miles Sanders sitting here for us, which would be at pick 48 overall, even a little bit later than ADP if he happens to fall to us, which he did. Are you good with Miles Sanders at this pick?
Yeah, and this would be a situation where, like, if you're using my rankings, you're not getting Miles Sanders too much. But over the last couple of weeks, all of these running backs in this range have basically fallen a half round. So I think that Miles Sanders would be – this is like the time to be drafting these type of RB2s, especially in this build where we're not going to probably draft a third running back until like round 11 or 12 or something like that. Yeah.
So would this still fit the bimodal strategy? Even getting a running back in round 4, is it still we're looking good as far as how you like to tackle that goes?
Yeah, but either way, like if we wanted to go Mike Davis and then not draft a single other running back the rest of the draft, like we can do that too. So any of these top 4 guys, I'm okay with, whatever your preference is, really.
3 running backs would be pretty bold. I don't have a single roster that looks like that yet. So how do you feel about Josh Jacobs here? We want to go that route?
Might have a little lag here. I'll take over for now. You got it?
Sorry, did you hear me? Let me see what's going on here. Can you hear me? Come in. Where'd he go? Hayden, do you got me? I am not. Are you there, Hayden? Hold on a second here. What's going on? You there?
I'm back. Could you hear me? Who do we end up with?
Yeah. I was wondering what happened there. I was like sitting there talking. I just messaged you on Twitter to make sure. All right, let me remove the old one. Let me make sure that works here. All right, I still have you.
Yep, you're good. Who do we end up with? Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, we have Josh Jacobs. So we went with Josh Jacobs. I don't know if you had heard me beforehand, but I just said that I don't have a single 3 running back build yet. And you kind of suggested maybe getting a 3rd running back and not doing any more running backs the rest of the way. So is that what we wanted to stick with? I want to make sure I understood that correctly with the lag that we had there.
Yeah, I mean, we could have gone any direction. This is, I think, the benefit of doing best ball on a half PPR site. And this is where I think, especially a lot of RotoViz people, typically 0 RB, hyper fragile, all that type of stuff. I think on the half PPR makes it viable. And I think that right now we just have to correctly approach this 3 running back build. This is a build where I think you and I have to be assuming that Christian McCaffrey, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs all do well. There's basically no reason to draft another running back, maybe a 4th one in like round 16, like a Darlington Evans or something like that. But I think this is the way we can just do this. And now like our next 6 picks are going to be wide receivers. So I think this is viable. And this is like what the chart is showing is if you had 3 running backs at the point of round 5, you're still looking okay. And I think we can go find the dot here. So if you go to the round 5 part at the bottom and then work your way up to the 3rd, and it should be the green dot
right up top here.
Right. Yep. So
we're looking good.
We're looking fine. We're still in an optimal build. We just can't then take a 4th running back the next round. So this is what I was trying to get to, where it's not just one strategy. Know all of them. We're sticking with this kind of like robust build because ADPs have fallen the last couple of days. And then we're just not going to draft another one for like 10 rounds. So I think I think this is the benefit of a half PPR site where all these type of strategies come into play more so than like a full PPR with tight end premium. Like all of a sudden, like it's hard to do this build correctly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that, I mean, this is actually like perfect. Like you said, it lines up very nicely with your chart. So we're looking good as far as that goes. We're kind of assuming all goes well and everyone stays healthy. We're right at the top of drafting a winner here. So I know you don't get to do many of these things, but at least you can say you drafted the winner in the puppy draft if everything goes according to plan. We made a pick that I think is a little bit interesting here because I think that the market in general has been very, divided on Josh Jacobs and his 2021 outlook. Let's queue up our picks real quick just to make sure we have those, and then we can maybe talk about Josh Jacobs a little bit because we went ahead and selected him. I kind of like him in his ADP, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on him. But before we do that, where do we want to look to go with this next pick? I think Kyle Pitts would be like beautiful, but I'm not anticipating that we're going to get him here. I mean, I don't understand what's happening with him here based on that ADP right now. He's dipping to 72nd overall almost.
I feel like we need to like go refresh Roto-World real quick and make sure Kyle Pitts didn't like tear his ACL in the last couple of minutes or something. Yeah. This would be absurd.
Yeah, this would probably be the latest I'd venture to say that anyone has maybe gotten Kyle Pitts post NFL draft if this actually sticks. I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here. I know that the one guy at the 6'11", he had an auto draft pick or two already, so we may not get Kyle Pitts if he's drafting with the ADP. But let's cross our fingers here and hope that we actually land him because that would be a lot of fun.
Could you refresh your the Underdog app just real quick, see what happened there?
Yeah, I'm not. Let me see. So I don't know what happened there though. All right, real quick. Can we go with Justin Herbert?
Yep, or a wide receiver, either way.
I'm not gonna have time to. I don't know what happened there, but that was weird. All right, so
we're gonna have to adjust here. So we got to prioritize Mike Williams and Josh Palmer, and basically not draft any other position except wide receiver until the draft is over.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That's all right.
That was odd.
So we've each had our own little hiccup on the connection here. So let's hope that the rest of the way we're good to go. We ended up getting Kareem Hunt. There's a little bit of a conflict with the bye week there with Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, I don't hate Kareem Hunt. I don't think that we were looking to target him here at this point in time in the draft, but now we're really going to be hammering wide receivers and tight ends. Kind of disappointing. I got really hyped up for Kyle Pitts late round fall there. Now I'd be curious to know if he actually fell as much as he did. Someone actually in the chat is saying refresh your draft. He went a long time ago. So maybe he wasn't actually hanging around. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but let's go ahead and get ready to queue up some wide receivers. We're going to pull up your rankings here. Mike Williams now falling to us with the Herbert stack would be ideal. I'm going to put Curtis Samuel and Will Fuller in there as well. I'm just going to prioritize them in the order of which you have them. But real quick, before we got a little bit confused there, we were talking about Josh Jacobs because we did select him a few picks ago. Where are you at on his 2021 outlook this season? Just given kind of how divided of a crowd we have on Josh Jacobs with the addition of Kenyon Drake this season.
So I think both sides of the argument are true. His ceiling is not as high as a lot of running backs, and that's why he should fall to ADP. But I think at a certain point, Josh Jacobs on a half PPR side, we can project 15 to 20 carries per game, all the goal line work, and the offense is functional. Like the Raiders aren't a good team, but the offense is pretty functional over there. So I don't love the Kenyon Drake signing for Josh Jacobs, obviously, but I think in half PPR, there's a chance that he becomes a top 15 running back again, and that would be okay. I don't think he's going to win too many leagues. It's not in the right range typically with zero or the RB dead zone that we're typically looking for. But I think that as ADP's correct where running back should have been going originally, I think that Josh Jacobs eventually becomes a value.
Yeah, and so the one thing that I think about Josh Jacobs is the Raiders were very intentional in how they used him down near the goal line and in the red zone. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he led all running backs in goal line carries, or was very close to the top. And I think that that's a role that he's going to hold on to. So in terms of touchdown upside, I think he could have some of that just with how they used him last year. But the concern certainly becomes, one, the team not being good. Is Kenyon Drake going to be working the more downs just because of needing to maybe pass to stay in some games? And then two, even in maybe a neutral game script, is Kenyon Drake still going to be utilized on third down to move the ball? So Jacobs, I think, is a little bit of a concern there. But at his ADP, kind of dropping a little bit into the early 5th round, I think he's an interesting pick and one of those guys who, if Kenyon Drake does go down, he's going to get a little bit more of a workload than what we're projecting for him right now. But I still kind of hold on to the idea that he's going to have some touchdown upside, and that in games where they're winning, he could possibly be the hammer to bring home games, late in the fourth quarter and stuff like that, and hopefully have a little bit of upside there for those taking him in the 5th round. But I like Josh Jacobs. I think I probably have a little bit more Kenyon Drake right now, particularly in the full PPR formats. But Josh Jacobs in a half PPR format, I don't think is that bad of a pick in the 5th round.
On today's Underdog football show with Josh, I talked Kenyon Drake as like somebody that we need to pay attention to. I think there'll be some weeks where he has usable weeks. And then I also think that he has the profile of a potential 3-down guy. And the Raiders aren't just committed to him this year heavily financially. Mm-hmm. Next year, he's going to be on the team just the way that his contract is set up. So Kenyon Drake is going to have a role. Like, they are force feeding a role for him. So I think that late in drafts, PPR, half PPR, I don't really care. There's like a very clear upside path to Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, I have this vision where John Gruden is on Twitter looking at all the people who mocked the Kenyon Drake signing, and he's like, well, I'm going to show you guys, and I'm going to give him I'm going to give him 80 targets. I don't care how good or bad it looks. I'm just going to throw it to him so much that you guys are going to feel silly for saying I signed this player to a high contract and didn't need him. Is that going to happen? Maybe not, but some of my teams are kind of banking on John Gruden trying to show how big brain he is, and that the signing was one that was not only good, but genius. So I could see John Gruden perhaps working Kenyon Drake into the offense to the point of it maybe being obnoxious at times. We are about to be on the clock again here. Some of the wide receivers who I had queued up, we lost. We're still sitting nice with Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown, but we're definitely going to be going very hard at wide receiver. Let me ask you this before we come up here, because I think now we're kind of also in an interesting range with tight ends where maybe we just punt the position and grab 3 rather late and go hard on running or on wide receivers here. Where are you at on fading the tight end position? Is there a certain spot where you're just kind of looking to cast it aside altogether and maybe take some of the double-digit rounds while stacking up on wide receiver? Is there an elite tight end who stands out to you that you think is worth the pick, like a Logan Thomas?
So I really like that this kind of range of Logan Thomas, Noah Fant. If I miss out on the top guys, I don't mind double dipping with these 2 guys and then only going with 2 tight ends and actually being able to battle a George Kittle team with 2 top guys. In our situation, since we don't have any wide receivers, really, I probably would just pick 1 and then go Michael Pittman. Who of course just was drafted. Corey Davis, Jalen Waddle, any of these guys really, I wouldn't mind. But I think I would pick one of these tight ends here, even though our wide receivers, we're really chasing points here.
Yeah. So let's go with Logan Thomas as that pick. I'm going to get Fant out of here just so we don't accidentally draft him. Do you want to just go with Corey Davis at the top of the rankings here? Do you think that we need maybe a little bit more upside from one of these rookies, given our 2 wide receiver build right now? Someone like Jalen Waddle or Rashad Bateman maybe gives us a little bit more than what Corey Davis could.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was meaning to watch Corey Davis. I don't have a preference between any of these guys. Pick whoever you think.
Let's go with Jalen Waddle. I kind of like the excitement of the rookie and seeing what he can do for us. We just lost Will Fuller a little bit. I think Jalen Waddle could be a fun player. He's certainly explosive. He's going to be in that Miami offense. Hopefully, Tua improves it in year 2. Maybe even a little bit of that connection that they had going back to their days at Alabama pays off for us here. Corey Davis, I think we've kind of seen him. We know what he's going to bring to the table more often than not. He performed well last year on a contract year with the Titans. Obviously, he wasn't brought back, but I'm pretty high on Jalen Waddle. Dave Caban actually kind of brought me around to Jalen Waddle, I think, before the draft when we were doing one of these shows a few months ago. So I like Jalen Waddle here. Are you fine with that pick? I'm assuming, being how close you have him with Corey Davis and Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, this is where when you're using my rankings, just draft whoever's in this range. I don't really care. When you're ranking wide receiver 38 versus 39, that is literally a coin flip. So yeah, I'm not gonna chase it. And we can go with a Tua stack in a little bit later. Another person we can possibly queue up would be Jared Cook. As gross as that sounds, I think that he's going to be like in the slot a lot, and that's how Lombardi used Jared Cook. So if we're looking for any correlation at all, at least we have some for later on. So maybe that's who our second tight end is going to be. But
I like Jared Cook.
I hate it, but it makes sense for this.
It's definitely not a pick that you feel good about, but I think that in terms of what we're trying to do and the fact that he is still replacing Hunter Henry, who was such a key role for the Chargers, I could see a situation where Jared Cook is still seeing a pretty substantial amount of targets and paying off for you in some weeks, and his ADP is I think once you kind of get past that 150, 160 range, you're talking about players where you're just banking on upside that you can talk yourself into. And Jared Cook is one of those players who I think could give you some of those weeks and be well worth the price. It doesn't take a lot to be a tight end one. And I think Jared Cook's going to get enough touchdowns to still possibly work his way into the tight end one conversation down the line, as the season plays out. So we'll go ahead and queue up Jared Cook. We got two in there. Josh Palmer would be like a super late round flyer, but we don't want to necessarily lose him right now. Should we look back at wide receivers? Is there any tight ends you have in this range who you'd be interested in over Jared Cook based on what we're looking to do?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I would rather have all these guys over Jared Cook. He's just somebody in like round 14 or whatever. Then we can start as Jared Cook comes up into the queue. That's when we should pounce on him. But yeah, I think we're our next couple picks will be receivers. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. No,
I'm with you. I guess I should have rephrased that. Not are there guys you would like more than Jared Cook, but based on what we're trying to do we need to get another tight end that early? But if we're fine with Jared Cook, I think that maybe a 2 tight end build here would still be the way to go if you're cool with that.
I think so too.
Okay, cool. Well, let's look at some wide receivers because Corey Davis is still hanging around. At least he was until I tend to jinx a lot of these players. I find when I start talking about who's hanging around, they're usually not there for much longer.
Right.
So we won't say anything else about Josh Palmer for the rest of this show. But what about Cole Beasley? I think that he's kind of an interesting player who's dropped. If you see a situation where he actually retires and it's a horrible pick, or is he still someone you want to buy every time someone's letting him drop in the draft? Because I'm still taking him personally.
He was the wide receiver, I believe, 34 and half PPR points per game last year, and he's now being drafted like closer to wide receiver 60. And he's on a Super Bowl contender. Like the chances he actually retires are so low. So give me the Cole Beasley discount. I thought he was already at a discount, but before those comments, and now his ADP has dropped like a legit like full round after that. So give me the Cole Beasley shares. I think he's going to be the number 2. He looked awesome last year. There were some times where he was hurt, but Cole Beasley was not messing around last year. He was a very productive player.
Yeah, I think some of what happened a few weeks ago on Twitter, I don't really want to get too much into it, but it's all kind of died down. We haven't really heard that much about it recently. So I don't think that's going to be a case of him all of a sudden walking away from the game. I think it was just, a moment. It happened. We can move on and take advantage of the fact that his ADP has dropped because of it. Speaking of Bills players, though, one player who you and Josh Norris had talked about, I guess it was last week now on the Underdog Best Ball show, was Emmanuel Sanders, and how that narrative has also recently kind of risen up, where he is in fact probably going to be the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in that offense instead of Gabriel Davis, who a lot of people were looking to take. Real quick, Cole Beasley, and then I had Nelson Aguilar queued up right after him based on your rankings. If you're good with that, then I think that's what we're going to go ahead and go with. We got 2 guys each already on those bye weeks, but we're going to have some wide receivers by the time this is done that I think we're fine with taking these picks.
Yeah, I don't think we can afford to be stressing over bye weeks with our wide receiver situation right now. Give me the best guys.
Given the little network lag that we had here and getting Kareem Hunt where we could have otherwise gotten probably a pretty decent wide receiver, I think we'll go ahead and take Beasley and we'll get Aguilar here. But where are you at right now on Emmanuel Sanders and this idea that he could possibly be, one of the leading targets in this Bills offense in 2021, given his age, first year with the team, all that? Where are you at on Emmanuel Sanders right now?
Well, the first thing, big picture stuff, when you're dealing with a second-year guy that was productive as a rookie versus a 34-year-old veteran is not on the same team, it's not a pretty picture.
Yeah.
With that said, the Bills gave Emmanuel Sanders $6 million. That's low-end starter money, not backup money, starter money. I thought Emmanuel Sanders still looked decent in a role, in like a smaller role last year. And I think that whoever's the wide receiver 3 for the Bills is going to be fantasy relevant in spurts. So then the next step after I looked at that stuff, I saw the report from The Athletic, Joe from The Athletic, who covers the Bill. He said that's going to be Emmanuel Sanders as the 3. So I said, what is going on with Gabe Davis? Because I remember he was productive last year. I actually watched him. And this is the part where it's like, it's my eye test. Take it with a grain of salt. Do whatever you will. I thought that Gabe Davis didn't look very athletic. And there was times where he was like trying to get out of his break, and it was just not happening. And most of his production was off of broken plays. And that wasn't a good sign for me. So just based off of Emmanuel Sanders' track record and what I thought Gabe Davis was doing on film, I can see why the Bills would want to start Emmanuel Sanders. So with that, I flipped Emmanuel Sanders one spot ahead of Gabe Davis in my own rankings. And we'll see if the ADP actually swings that much.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think that Emmanuel Sanders in this offense is going to be a solid player if he is in fact the wide receiver 3 on that team. I think Josh Norris had actually said that if you compared Gabriel Davis' shuttle time to his shuttle time, you wouldn't be able to spot the difference, which I thought was a really funny and interesting way to describe.
For the record, that's a complete lie. Josh is not athletic enough to even come close to that.
Well, it paints a good picture of what exactly you guys are talking about here when you say that Gabe Davis is not the athlete that we're looking for in a wide receiver. So I thought that was a fun little point in the podcast. But no, I think that Emmanuel Sanders was highly productive. I just had his stats up here. Highly productive, relatively speaking. Let me put it that way. Certainly not a wide receiver who's going to, blow you away with his numbers. But if you're talking 61 receptions, 726 yards, 5 touchdowns from last season with the Saints, he's going to have his weeks where he's going to get you some wide receiver 2, maybe even sneaking a wide receiver 1 there, depending on the week. And he'll be a nice player in the Bills offense that I think is really just probably going to keep on throwing the ball at a ridiculous rate. I know we try to talk ourselves into this idea that maybe Devin Singletary could be a decent pick, and I think that there's a scenario in which he could be a nice pick, but I really just think that hammering these Bills wide receivers is the way to go in terms of position players on that team. Dawson Knox doesn't really do a lot for me as a late round tight end. I like to target late round tight ends. He's not really doing it for me. It's honestly those Bills wide receivers, and people were taking Gabriel Davis relatively early up until the point in time where this Emmanuel Sanders news broke. So now I think that'll be interesting to see how the Emmanuel Sanders news kind of shifts the overall ADP and whether or not it actually comes to fruition over the course of the full season. But
I will say real quick with the Emmanuel Sanders stats, and you made a good point. The Bills are going to be near the league high in pass attempts, and then in the recent season, the Broncos, the 49ers, the Saints, all of them, especially the Saints last year with Taysom Hill, were super balanced. So I think that there's a chance that Emmanuel Sanders could have 700, 800 yards. He's not going to win you your league, but I think there will be opportunities for him to have top 30 weeks. And if he has four of them this year, you're in the money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a very a solid season for him based on the ADP. He actually just went a few picks ago too. Someone went ahead and got him here at now I'm trying to see where he's 1106. So pretty decent little spot to be getting him. If he gives you this wide receiver 3 weeks, occasional wide receiver 2 week, I think those who get him are going to be very happy with that. As we get ready to approach our next pick here, Tua Tagovailoa is still on the board. He would work perfectly with our build in terms of no bye week conflict with Justin Herbert. We can stick with 2 quarterbacks if we in fact want to do that. And then we also have Jalen Waddle, who we have on here. Are you good with Tua at this spot for at least one of these picks between the 12th and the 13th round?
Yep, couldn't get better than that. He hits everything for us right here.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, he does as far as that goes. And then we also have Jared Cook queued up. We'd be reaching a little bit on him if we did choose to do that. But I guess the question is, do we want to do that, or do we think some other players could make it back to us where we go wide receiver here? Let me pull up both.
Yeah, I would probably go wide receiver. It looks like there's some decent tight ends still on the board where even if we didn't get Jared Cook, we can find somebody else. So
yeah, the tight ends are kind of, they've been hanging around for a bit. All right, so we're going to get Tua. We'll let that one time out here. Next on your list, you have Rashad Perriman. You also have Jacoby Myers. Even Terrace Marshall, I think, is an interesting player who I really like. I could see a scenario where he's perhaps one of those underhyped rookies this offseason by the media, and then as the season unfolds, he is kind of blowing people away. The likely replacement for Curtis Samuel in this offense. Would you be against a Terrace Marshall pick at this spot?
Not at all. He has plenty of upside. An injury to Robbie or DJ Moore would unlock Terrace Marshall, and there's chances where he just is the number 3 and he he's just decently productive. I mean, I think he was a really boom bust prospect, just the way that his production was at LSU, and kind of like there's some inconsistencies on his tape, and then he fell in the draft because of an injury. So he's really boom bust, but like the boom potentials are like certainly there. So I think this is the range where you take a rookie and hopefully he turns into Chase Claypool or something like that.
Yeah, and a good boom potential, especially on this wide receiver roster that we're looking to put together right now. Like you said, we're kind of chasing points after getting that fourth running back we didn't want. But I kind of like the way this team is shaping out. I'll go over it real quickly here, get your thoughts on it as we approach the beginning of the 13th round here. We have two quarterbacks right now, Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. I think if we wanted to stick there, that would be absolutely fine. We went Christian McCaffrey, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, and Kareem Hunt for 4 running backs and the ever popular hyper-fragile running back bill that you can find exclusively on Underdog Fantasy. We have Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Cole Beasley, Nelson Aguilar, and Terrace Marshall at wide receiver. And then currently just sitting on one tight end with Logan Thomas, hoping that we get our guy Jared Cook back in this next pick. But even if we don't, I think we're going to have some other tight ends there waiting for us to scoop up. So where are you at on this team right now? Do you think we're going to recover okay given our extra running back that we I wouldn't say lucked into, but we're stuck with?
At least we got a high upside running back. At least it wasn't like some committee guy or like Kareem Hunt has like top 5 potential if something happened to Nick Chubb. So at least we got lucky with the exact running back.
Right.
But yeah, we're going to draft 10 wide receivers here, or I haven't done the math, but it's about 10 wide receivers. And hopefully we can find some breakout guys. I will say, out of all the positions, I feel the most comfortable trying to peg the breakout wide receiver compared to the other positions. I think it's a very talent-based and just are you on the field enough base. And I think that I can read into the training camp and the depth charts and the salary cap situations. And I feel like I can peg the wide receivers who are going to have like usable weeks compared to like the committee running backs. Like that to me is a way more of a guessing game, at least on my end.
Well, we're going to bank on that research to bring us home then, because you're right. We if we go with just 2 tight ends and two quarterbacks, and that's going to be 4 there plus another 4 running backs. So 10 wide receiver build is what we're looking at. We're currently sitting on 6. We got 4 more wide receivers we can go with after our and plus a tight end. So we're ready to bring this thing home and see what happens. I do think that wide receiver, like you said, is kind of one of those easier positions to try to project scenarios in which you could see them playing and succeeding in certain roles. And then now you're talking about getting these guys in the 14th and 15th round. I think this is where you kind of like you factor in things like talent, situation, knowing the team's different, depth charts and what their situations are looking like. Sterling Shepard, just looking at your rankings here, is a guy who I can't see him not being on the field in 2021. I think he's been a pretty solid player when he's producing. I like him at his ADP. I don't see any reason to pull him off the field unless something happens where I guess Kadarius Toney unexpectedly dominates in training camp. But I don't think there's been too many great reports on Kadarius Toney post draft. So
they've been bad.
Yeah, they've been kind of bad. So Sterling Shepard's a guy who I like here. AJ Green, you have at the top of your queue, and a lot of people are hating on AJ Green right now. Where are you at on AJ Green in terms of these rankings? Because you have him ahead of some players who people like in best ball, but I think that AJ Green on this Cardinals offense, I think this could be another situation like we talked about earlier, John Gruden wanting to force feed Kenyon Drake. Is there going to be some weird situation that plays out where the Cardinals are just going to try to give AJ Green his one final moment in the sun before he fades off into retirement in a few years?
That's what I'm thinking. So if you look at how much money the Cardinals gave AJ Green, like they gave him starter level money. Like they were not messing around. And not only did they give him starter level money, they tacked on 2 void years to his contract because the Cardinals were so salary cap. They were in salary cap hell. They had to extend his contract for 2 void years to make it happen. So they were like all in on AJ Green. So I don't see him like coming off the field unless he's like an absolute disaster, which is certainly possible. But I think that AJ Green I think he's going to start on the outside. I don't think he's going to come off the field very often. And there's like this upside case where he was just overplaying with the Bengals and Brandon Allen and like all this, like the total scrubs over there. And that this Cardinals team's more exciting and maybe has a little bit of a bounce back. So I hate that I'm higher on him. And I'm mad that AJ Green just got sniped.
I know. I was just gonna say we're about to get him here, so we can keep talking about that. Do you want to go with Jared Cook with one of these picks? We can let his one time out, and then we can get another wide receiver here. I mean, MVS is a player who I think is interesting there. We'd have 3 wide receivers on week 13 bye, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Kadarius Toney, like we just said recently, there haven't been a lot of really great reports on him. Are we fine with fading him, or should we still take a shot on him given his first round draft capital and maybe the chance that he pulls together over the next several weeks?
I would go MVS here. This is where like the wide receivers kind of fall off a little bit. MVS was a top. I think he was 77th in better and best ball points, which is like if you took the average wide receiver 36, which is like 9 points per game, and then compared it to how many weeks a player had above that threshold. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was actually a pretty productive player in best ball just because all of his production's on long touchdowns. So better in best ball, it's like the most absurd saying, but there is some merit to it. Like it's downfield threats, and that's exactly what MVS is. So we'll see.
I thought it was funny. Twitter started kind of calling out the better in best ball moniker and people who use it, and so it's kind of like one of those things where like I think after I noticed it was being called out on Twitter last year, I was like, all right, I can't say that anymore because I'll sound like a fish and everyone will point it out to me. So I no longer say better in best ball, but then going and turning around and using that as a point scoring metric was a very smart way. So it was very well done.
Yeah, as long as I can tie it back to a number, then the other nerds who are mocking the nerds, they can't say anything about it. So that's my strategy.
Suddenly they have nothing to say. It's curious how that happens.
Yeah.
But no, that's actually really awesome. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's a player who Aaron Rodgers loves targeting downfield. At any point in time, you're either pulling your hair out or you're praising the fantasy gods for what Marquez Valdez-Scantling just did on any given week. Whether he's dropping an 80-yard touchdown pass or hauling one in, he's going to get you those weeks. I don't think that the Packers are going to be pulling him off the field this year. They didn't do anything in the draft or free agency, which historically the Packers apparently don't do anything in the wide receivers with wide receivers in free agency or the draft. So nothing has suggested that they have no interest in playing him this season. So I think he is going to play. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to, in fact, play for the Packers at some point in time. Hopefully, I don't want it to be Jordan Love. I'd like to see all these Packers picks play off with Aaron Rodgers throwing to them. But MVS is going to, I think, be Aaron Rodgers' favorite downfield target again in 2021. And if that happens, I think that he's going to give you a lot of those better and best ball points that we're looking for. And at this spot in the draft, it's a really nice place to be taking him. Do you have any interest in Amari Rodgers at all in drafts? I see him in your rankings. He's not a player who I've been taking. I did a little bit of looking on him for a rookie article for RotoViz a while back. I wasn't incredibly wild about the profile. I thought that the best part about him was the idea that he might be playing with Aaron Rodgers. Can you sell me on that a little bit more, or do you kind of feel the same way?
I think as a rookie, he's going to have a very defined role, and it's kind of like Deebo Samuel. It's going to be a lot of like the jet sweeps, all of the underneath stuff, shallow drags, like a little bubble screen. That's going to be Amari Rodgers, and that's exactly how he was used at Clemson. So if you just look at like from an analytics perspective, Amari Rodgers' prospect profile is not that great, but if you look, Hunter Renfrow was in front of him, Justin Ross, T. Higgins, like there were some absolute dudes at Clemson that he was sitting behind. So I think one thing we can do with our prospects is kind of make a little bit of an exception for an Alabama, a Clemson, Ohio State wide receiver. Like it's hard to get on the field when everyone else is a 5-star. To me, it's a red flag if you're not playing at Cal early on in your career. That's a red flag to me. But like if Amari Rodgers couldn't beat a 25-year-old Hunter Renfrow with 4 years of starting slot receiver, like I don't think that's like that big of a deal. So I think Amari Rodgers probably going to be better than his prospect profile, but I don't think that means he has like some massive ceiling for these best ball tournaments. Gotcha.
Okay, so I think we're pretty in tune with that. I do like the point that you made in terms of who you're sitting behind and considering that. All right, real quick, we are on the clock. Do we want to go with Josh Palmer for one of these picks, and then we can throw in another one of these wide receivers in the meantime?
I think so.
Him? All right, so we're going to make Josh Palmer one of these wide receivers. Now we're looking at your rankings for a couple guys who you actually have above him. One guy who I think is interesting in terms of just we saw a tiny bit of him last season. He's not a whole lot, but Marquez Callaway had a couple games where he was looking pretty good on the field for the Saints. And I think there's a situation where he is, in fact, the Saints wide receiver too. It's pretty undefined behind Michael Thomas. Traquan Smith has been a little bit disappointing. And then Denzel Mims, a first-round draft pick. Like, I think it'd be between either of these two guys for me. Is there one you prefer more over the other?
I think Marquez Marquez Callaway is a better chance of playing more snaps. And I think that Denzel Mims is probably the better player, but if he's not going to be on the field, then it's tough to see. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go Marquez Callaway. Like you said, Traquan Smith has never done anything,
Yeah.
and Marquez Callaway can win downfield a little bit. And I think that Jameis Winston offers that more than a aging Drew Brees did. So maybe we see something out of Marquez Callaway. I think if you read like Nick Underhill, who's the best Saints reporter out there, they seem like they're pretty high on Marquez Callaway. So I think he's somebody that I am often looking to target late in drafts. I think that there's a chance, like you said, that he can end up being the breakout number 2 receiver. And you just need a couple weeks from him, and that's all you can ask for in round 17.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I'm with you on that. I think too, you want to talk about players like you just said. Marquez Callaway has a better chance of being on the field. If you want to talk about a guy who doesn't have maybe as much of a chance of being on the field at this point in time, it's probably Denzel Mims, who's been talked about working with the twos in mini camp right now this offseason. Kind of a bad way to start your second year in the league as a former first-round draft pick. Is that correct? Was Mims a first-round draft pick?
I think early, mid-second. Yeah, top 50 pick. Yeah, it sucks because the Jets gave Keelan Cole $5.5 million. Jameson Crowder has $5 million. Elijah Moore is an absolute baller. They gave Corey Davis all of this money, and it's a new coaching staff. So like Denzel Mims just kind of squeezed. Yeah. So even if he wins the number 3 job in training camp, it's going to be a rotation. It's not like one of these stable wide receiver 3 spots. Even if he did win the job, and right now I wouldn't bank on him winning the wide receiver 3 job.
Yeah, with as much as I kind of like those other wide receivers, you might be looking at more of like some like weird like situational wide receiver 3 spot. Excuse me, for Denzel Mims, where he's not on the field as much as you'd like to see him. Maybe at that ADP it doesn't really hurt you that much, but when you can kind of make the case for other guys' upside, I don't think there's any reason to feel like you have to necessarily take him here. If anything, get a little bit creative and take Keelan Cole at the end of your draft and see what happens there. Because I do like the way Keelan Cole has played historically with the Jaguars. When given a chance, he's been a fairly decent wide receiver playing on some bad Jaguars teams. If the Jets actually have some faith in Keelan Cole and what he can do, it'd be asking a lot. It's probably not going to happen. But the idea of a Keelan Cole, like some kind of crazy season where he's getting like 150, insane to think that might be a breakout season. That probably won't be the case. But if they're force-feeding Keelan Cole targets on a Jets defense that's going to need to throw a lot, he might actually be a pick that could end up being, much better than you're expecting him to be, where you're getting him well in the 200th overall pick at this point in time in the draft. Are you drafting any Jets wide receivers not named Elijah Moore or Corey Davis?
I think what's going to happen is Jameson Crowder is going to start in the slot. Elijah Moore is going to play flanker. And if Jameson Crowder isn't playing well, then Elijah Moore will go back into the slot. And then that's when Denzel Mims versus Keelan Cole is going to come into play. And I think that there's going to be some packages where Elijah Moore is going to slide into the slot. And that's when you're going to see like the rotations start to happen. So for me, if I was like trying to project routes run, Corey Davis in a tier of his own, Elijah Moore in a tier of his own after that. And then I would go Jameson Crowder, then Keelan Cole, then Denzel Mims. But I think those last 3 will kind of rotate in and out. And then I think Elijah Moore and Corey Davis are clearly going to be the 2 best receivers on the team.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see Elijah Moore. He's one of those guys who, like, I go in the drafts and I have in my mind that this is going to be the draft where I pick Elijah Moore, and then it always seems like he's going at a spot that's like a little bit earlier than what I'm expecting it to be. So at some point in time, I might need to get a little bit more bold on my Elijah Moore stance and just reach on him by maybe a round or something so I can get him. But Elijah Moore is a guy, like all the camp reports have been pretty awesome so far. If he's what everyone expects him to be, then I think he could be a very fun player to have on the Jets this year. With Zach Wilson throwing the ball. And an offense that I kind of envision will be throwing a rather decent amount, just given the defense that they're working with. So, I think the Jets wide receivers are an interesting group. Jameson Crowder is someone who I really wanted at certain points this offseason, and now I've kind of soured on him a little bit given the uncertainty of the situation. But I wish
Jameson Crowder would have said, "Screw you, Jets! I'm out of here. Cut me. Yeah. I'll go sign with the Falcons for $5 million and actually have a certified role." I can't believe that he took a pay cut to stay in that rotation. So
I couldn't either. I was kind of disappointed by that as well. We're on the board. We got the last pick here. Who do we want to go with? Jalen Hurd, I think, is an interesting player.
Hurd or Cornell Powell, both of those guys probably not going to see the field much, but if they did, there's like a path to them being attached to good offenses. So I think either one of those 2 makes some sense.
So I'm going to go with Jalen Hurd because
Let's go.
One of the things that I've been talking about a little bit with Sean Siegel. We've drafted a couple best ball teams recently on the FFPC, and we've been eyeing up a lot of the playoff schedules in terms of just where they fall with the regular season. Weeks 14, 15, 16, and 17. And one of the things that is very nice looking for the 49ers players is that end of the season schedule for the playoffs. I don't remember all the teams off the top of my head, but I believe week 17 is the Texans, and all the defenses they face beforehand is very nice as well. So in the event that Jalen Hurd does play, sees the field, and has any kind of role with the 49ers, if he's able to, do something against the Texans and during that fantasy playoff period, I think that might be kind of a decent pick. It seems like the 49ers and most fantasy gamers tend to be high on Jalen Hurd and his athleticism and his ability. He's just never been able to stay healthy and get things done. So maybe 2021 will be the year of Jalen Hurd. It seems like every year it's a different 49ers wide receiver. Before we had Dante Pettis, now it's Jalen Hurd.
Right.
Now it's Jalen Hurd hype every offseason. So let's take a look at this team here real quick. Again, for those who maybe are just tuning in at the back end of this thing, we are doing a puppy best ball tournament draft over on Underdog Fantasy with Hayden Winks tonight. We just wrapped it up. For quarterbacks, we went with Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. At running back, we have Christian McCaffrey, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Kareem Hunt. Wide receiver, we got 10 of them to go through, but we'll do it quickly. Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Cole Beasley, Nelson Aguilar, Terrace Marshall Jr., Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Josh Palmer, Marquez Callaway, and Jalen Hurd. And then at tight end, we did go with Logan Thomas and Jared Cook. So we did manage to get a little bit of a Charger stack in there, which I think is at least nice, given kind of being forced into Justin Herbert unexpectedly. How do you feel about this team overall with what we were able to do with this team tonight?
So I think most weeks our flex spots are going to be filled by a running back, which is usually not the case what we're aiming to do. But in half PPR, I think it makes it a little bit more viable. And Kareem Hunt has a ton of upside. And so we're only looking for basically one wide receiver spot to fill because Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, if we're going to win this thing, are going to be in the lineup basically every single week. So the combination between our wide receiver 3 and 10 have to be filled in one spot per week. Yeah, I think we can do that. So we got a little correlation between the tight ends and quarterbacks. I thought this draft, once we were stuck with the 4 wide receiver or 4 running backs, I think we built this out exactly how you would do in that type of build.
Yeah, I think it went about as well as we could. I think that one thing that we kind of were able to do a little bit later on, too, was look at some of the upside and some of the players who we had, beginning with Terrace Marshall and Marquez Valdez-Scantling in particular. I think we make very good cases in terms of the upside that they could have on their own offenses. Terrace Marshall being a wide receiver who maybe fell a little bit in the draft due to some bad circumstances. MVS being better in best ball. For those of you who don't believe it, it's an actual stat, not just a saying these days. And then, Josh Palmer, a guy who we didn't really talk about, but was he a 3rd round pick by the Chargers this year?
Yes, it was a little earlier than we all expected it to be.
Yeah, he kind of came out of nowhere. Was selected by the Chargers, but he's nonetheless part of our Charger stack that we're tying together. Marquez Callaway could be on the field a little bit for the Saints, and then this is the year of Jalen Hurd. Finally this year, folks. So we rounded out that way, and then our tight ends, I have no problem with. I think that we'll be fine at tight end. We shouldn't be too disappointed if either of those tight ends are finding their way into our lineup either week. So I like this team. I think it came out pretty well overall. Decent little projection there, I guess. So this is I guess going to probably wrap it up. Hayden, can you tell everybody one more time where they can find you at, where they can check out all your work?
Yeah, so I'm at Hayden Winks on Twitter, and just follow the Underdog Fantasy account on Twitter. You'll see my stuff there. Josh Norris and I started a podcast and YouTube channel called The Underdog Football Show. Go follow us there. We're doing 4 shows per week, and it's basically only best ball coverage. Yeah. So we talk about all these little strategies that we talked on here today. So go follow us over there. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely check out all of Hayden and Josh's work. Both of them are doing some incredible stuff over on Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has been absolutely killing it with just all of the content they've been putting out in terms of not just being a best ball platform. They've really grown into a platform that is going deep on articles, deep on podcasts, and they got 2 of the best people in the podcast industry and the fantasy industry doing it. Hayden is one of those spearheading that operation, so he's killing it. Definitely check out all of his work. Thanks again, Hayden, for coming on tonight. It was a pleasure having a chance to sit down with you, draft the team, talk a little bit of best ball shop with you, and it was a pleasure having you on. So thanks a lot for doing that. And for everyone else who tuned in, thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back, I believe, the week after next with another guest. And until then, have a great rest of your evening.